Good morning. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Tuesday, June 30th, and the time now is 9 o'clock. Notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on Tuesday, June 16. Second notice was issued on Friday, June 26. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 282-35 LS, the Fiscal Year Appropriation Act, as requested by the Governor relative to the Department of Land Management, Ancestral Land Commission, Chamorro Land Trust Commission for fiscal year 2021 budget requests, and they'll be heard in that same order. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my colleagues that have joined me. I have the Oversight Chair for Land, which is Senator Therese Terlai, joined by Senator Kelly Mars Taitro and Senator Tello Tairigui. General rules for the budget hearing. Those testifying on behalf of the department will be recognized by myself and invited to the panel. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read and lengthy testimony should be summarized. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. My colleagues and panel members, we are discussing the budget of 2021. We may dip into 2020, but not much. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, I ask that you remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by the members of the committee. Proper form and quorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and quorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and or may be asked to leave or be escorted/removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and title for the record. At this time, I ask the panel members from the Department of Land Management to please rise and for our sergeant at arms to please swear them in. Thank you, Sergeant Arms. I ask Mr. Bora, if you please just state your name and your title and begin your presentation of Budget 2021. Thank you.
Process. Through the recording process that we institute at Land Management, and of course with the COVID-19 health emergency, the Department of Land Management was shut down for a period of time, affecting income revenue from the recording that we do. Is it a positive impact or a negative impact? At this particular time, we do not know. We are tracking it on a daily basis. The information that we have now, up until the month of June, is that we have brought in so far, fiscal year 2020, $2,084,000. This time last year, in FY 2019, the department brought in $2,351,000. Of course, you see the drop there. And going back further to FY 2018, in June of 2018, the department brought in $2.5 million. So you know right away that we are, at least from last year's tracking, about $350,000 less. We keep these amounts on a daily track. End of the day, every day, the recording division gives me a figure as to what was brought in that particular day. For example, yesterday, the department brought in $10,000 in documentary tax. It also brought in, I believe, $700 in recording fee. Those two amounts are an indication of certain things. The documentary tax is an indication of the value of the transactions. The recording fee is just an indication that there was a transaction, sort of like a basic fee, $25 recording fee. The documentary tax depends on the amount of the transaction. As of June, and like I say, I just want to repeat, we brought in $2.08 million, of course down from the last 2 years, and down from a previous year because we had looked back also to FY 2017. So we're tracking that daily, and of course the legislature is informed of that amount monthly, as well as, of course, BBMR, ADELUP, and the other finance agencies. Secondly, the Department of Land Management, and these are items why we should hold the amount for land management in suspense right now and get that amount from BBMR. Secondly, the Department of Land Management just last week received a technical assistant grant in the amount of $309,000. Of course, that will affect our budget previously, and of course it will affect it positively on that. So I ask that the committee hold that amount for the budget of land management in abeyance until we work things out with BBMR because of that new issue. Number three, there is a significant impact to the personnel category for the Department of Land Management with some recent revelations. Number one is retirement. Recently, a former employee of land management wanted to retire. When he checked his retirement situation at the retirement fund, everybody found out that for a certain number of years, this employee, his retirement contribution from the Department of Land Management was not paid. And we found this out actually maybe about 6 or 7 months ago. And just recently, we found the amount that was due to him, as well as another employee that was in the same situation. Went away on military leave. During the time that he went on military leave, for whatever reason, the department did not pay his retirement contribution. So we have 2 employees like that. We also have an employee who has a Civil Service Commission settlement. Then these are prior year's expenditure. So, that we would like the legislature, as well as, of course, BBMR to consider. Also recently, as recent as maybe 2 months ago, the department also found out the results of a wage study appeal that some employees at the Department of Land Management made, and these became successful appeals. And there is a certain amount of liability that the government land management would have to pay. And it is a significant amount that we would like the legislature to recognize. Thirdly, because it's in the personnel category, without getting into details, any budget of the Department of Land Management was presented is probably very, very, very heavy on the personnel side. A large percentage of your budget is always personnel, and like that. Since I started at land management, let me just mention some situations that had happened to personnel. While not significantly impacted in terms of dollar amount, it does impact the employee in terms of production and service. For example, we had 2 employees that were contributing to land management that separated, 2 land management employees, actually at Land Trust, but when the agency separated, these 2 employees went to Chamorro Land Trust, as it was in the staffing pattern, but these 2 employees were in the administrative part of the operations of those 3 agencies when they were together at one time. And when these 2 employees, administrative employees, went to Land Trust, It left the Department of Land Management with actually one employee that was in charge of the administrative services, which is the administrative services officer sitting to my left, Jean. And my apologies that I didn't introduce Virginia Flores. Jean, as she's known, is our administrative services officer. Another item that happened in the personnel category is one of our employees who had been with leave without pay for a couple of years finally decided to separate from the agency. So we lost that person. In addition, and without giving away the health situation of the department, we had we had 10 employees who took 40 plus hours of sick leave. They were ill. These sick leave were justified, but 9 employees with 40 hours more of sick leave, that breaks down to 360 productive hours from these employees through no fault of their own, of course. And then we had the death of one employee, and for whatever reason, we had 7 employees who had deaths in their immediate family: father, husband, mother, father, mother, brother. These are very close, of course, to the employees. And while this may not have a significant impact in terms of dollar amount, it does have an impact on the psyche and the production of that employee. That's a given. We also had 2 employees who retired from the department. One of them was a very high-ranking, a division head who retired, who took the money budgeted for his position and then some when he retired, as he deserved. And even that employee had problems with retiring. There were 2 years that were not credited to him. So because of all this retirement issue, I've encouraged all of the employees to check on your retirement issue, because the Department of Land Management actually in the demographics has an aging staff on it. We have 34 employees, and out of those 34 employees, this is a listing of the 34 employees. All of the colored sections, the yellows can retire by service. They're eligible to retire by service. The greens are eligible to retire by age. And then you have the group in the middle that are aged but do not have that service in the government to be able to retire. And these are employees that are constantly looking for a hopefully better, higher position within the department, within the government, to continue their career. But however, they are not above looking for opportunities in the private sector and moving on, and thereby losing some of the training and knowledge that we've instilled in this department. So the department does have that issue in the personnel section. In addition to that, we did a breakdown within the divisions of people eligible to retire and possibly retiring. In one division, it's 50%. In one division, it will leave only 1 person in it. In another division, 2. And in another division, pretty good, less than half. And then in another division, 3 out of 9. And although you're looking at numbers, what's critical is the type of positions that these people hold that are eligible for retirement. Because if you have a division head, somebody with a license retiring, doesn't really help the situation too much. So we have those issues in the personnel category in the budget that have developed newly over these past few months, in addition, of course, to personnel and salaries and benefits being the largest part of any budget that the department would have. Number 4, we are working with, and this is again not a new development, it is a new development, it has a new development because of the COVID-19 function or emergency. But what had happened is OTEC and the Department of Land Management and a private company were working on what they call a proof of concept situation, where the private company would donate for free certain number of computer equipment. OTEC would manage the equipment, and land management would house the equipment. No cost to the government, no cost to OTEC, cost to the private company. So what's in it for the private company? The private company wants these computers to be used in the public library section, where members of the public and the title companies come in and they use the computers and they say, hey, this sounds pretty good. I wonder if I could have one at home like this, or I wonder if the title company would want to purchase computers to use in there, thereby taking down the cost of land management and the government providing a computer unit for that private company. And that's called a proof of concept a situation. The only caveat to that thing is that computers have to be installed and configured by a representative, an employee of that company. I believe in this case it was Dell. And they were supposed to fly out somebody from Round Rock, Texas to set it up. Of course, with the COVID situation, travel plans were not in tune at that time. And we were hopeful that working with our stakeholders, the title companies, whose underwriters are in San Antonio, Texas, we're hopeful that maybe a letter from the title company to Dell and the underwriting company would help get that a representative out to Guam. But in the last 2 weeks, situation in Texas and in San Antonio has changed dramatically with the COVID-19. I think their graph went like this. So we have that problem of bringing that person out to install that. But we're still hopeful and looking at it positively that we can get that involved in there. So what does that have to do with our budget? A certain part of our budget, we are expending some money now, and a certain part of our budget that was proposed in December of 2019 involves some of that equipment needed for land management. Just as a note to the committee, the Department of Land Management's computers, more than half of them do not meet the security protocol required by OTEC. It's not up to that level, which is why there's resistance from OTEC. Everybody's saying, well, can't we do this and do it from home, We have a problem with security concerns from OTEC on that. But that is one of the things that will affect the budget positively, I hope. And then there is the process. So any change in our budget, of course, we would have to submit through BBMR. But on all of these factors, we are working already with BBMR on the proof of concept, on the personnel issues to adjust our budget. So when I say we can put the amount in the suspense, just the bottom line amount, we fully expect a lowering of an appropriation in our budget because of all these other things. We're hopeful that rather than a lowering of their budget, that it may be a reprogramming of funds within the department. But we have information on the tracking. It's not looking good. And fortunately or unfortunately, there is a difference between government budgeting September to October to September, and private budgeting, which is the calendar year to take advantage of tax laws. But we do see in December of each year, we do see December 2017, $568,000 came in. In December 2018, $800,000 came in. In December of 2019, $900,000 came in. But again, these are, if you're looking at our budget and you're looking at our revenue we bring in, our revenue the big ones come in typically in December, which is beyond the budget year of this, this time that we're talking about. So is that difference that affects our figures. So next year, in next fiscal year rather, next calendar year, December of 2020 would look real good, but it won't be reflected in these revenue tracking that we do. With that, we do know that we also have some potential administrative sections that we might ask the legislature through BBMR and through the front office, through the administration of some maybe administrative changes that may require us on it, on some situations. But I think other than that, our budget, if it doesn't remain at the level we submitted in December 2019, it would probably be lower. We fully expect it to be lower. With that, Administrative Services Officer Jean Flores and I are available for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Bora. I'd like to also recognize my colleagues that have joined us this morning. Our Vice Speaker, Senator Talina Nelson. We also have Senator Mary Camacho Torres, Senator Jim Moylan, and Senator Sabina Paris that have joined us. Being that you've asked for a suspension, unless the Oversight Chair would like to defer from that, I have no problem on my committee. That we'll get back with you, and hopefully maybe in another week or two, we can come back and we can look at your budget, and because the difference are going to drop. And I have to admit that majority of your budget anyway is part of your revolving fund, so it's really not going to, it's going to be on you on what you got. So, Oversight Chair, do you have any objection to that? Other than that, we can wait for it to come back with a better report based on what happened in the COVID. Senator Therese, do you have any objection to that?
No objection if you're going to resubmit another budget request, is what you're saying?
Yes.
And, but were there any, do you expect any lapses for 2020?
We do, you know, with the all these things in the personnel division, you know, normally you don't have any lapses. Your budget is basically made up of personnel, priority, utilities, and lease. And then if you have any money for capital outlay or anything like that, we may have some lapses, but only because of, we may have to reprogram something because of this new thing that came out. For example, one of our last minute purchases was about $23,000 for 5 switches, 5 computer switches. One of our computer switches had gone down. They needed replacement anyway. But with this grant on it, we're thinking of taking back that certification of funds so that we don't spend that. So that, you could say, is a lapse, but we would probably like to reprogram that 23,000 to something else in the budget. So we'd still like to spend it, Senator.
All right, thank you, Mr. Boren. Also, I was going to ask you about if there's any of your employees are due retro, and you've explained all that. So I'll be looking forward to seeing your updated report. Most of the questions I was going to ask anyway, you've answered it, and I look forward to your next budget submission, and as you process through the channels, and we'll accept it, and then I'll work with your oversight. Do we need to have a hearing, or is acceptable, and then we can move from there. Okay, Mr. Boer?
And of course, Senator, that budget submission will be coming through BBMR.
Thank you, sir.
Here, thank you very much.
That being said, this will we will suspend the budget hearing with Department of Land Management, and we'll wait, and then we'll advise the people of Guam and all my colleagues of when the next hearing will be. Thank you, Mr. Boer.
Thank you very much, Senators, and thank you very much, committee members.
And ask Sergeant Arms to please bring in the Ancestral Land Commission Director or Acting Director. And please just swear him in also as you bring him in.
speaking.
Thank you, Sergeant Arms. I would just reiterate, because we have a new panel here from the Ancestral Land Commission, restate the general rules for the budget hearing. Those testifying on behalf of the department or commission will be recognized by myself. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide the legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. I remind the panel and the members that have just joined, my colleagues that have joined us, we are talking about budget 2021. We may dip and ask questions of 2020, but there shouldn't be much there. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony. You are asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and/or may be asked to leave or be escorted / removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and title for the record. I understand, Sergeant Arms, you have already sworn in the members of the panel. I will now ask the members of the panel to please state your name and title for the record and begin your testimony.
Good morning, Senators, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Taitigui, Senator Marsh, Senator Perez, Senator Torres, Senator Nelson, and Senator Talahi. Good morning, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity to testify here before this committee on behalf of the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. My name is John Birch, and I am the acting director of the GALC. And good morning, Senator Moylan. Okay, the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission was created in 1999 by Public Law 2545 to pass title of federal excess lands upon return to the government of Guam and back to the original landowners or their heirs. The GALC is also required to maintain a land bank for those dispossessed original landowners who will never realize the return of their ancestral lands, to take title as trustees of former Spanish Crown lands and other non-ancestral lands, to manage these lands and to administer all assets and revenue of the land bank and act as a developer of the lands, and to facilitate just compensation on claims made by ancestral landowners who cannot regain possession or title of their ancestral lands because the continued use of their ancestral lands for public benefit by either the federal government or the government of Guam. The GALC's Board of Commissioners consists today of 2 confirmed members of a 7-member board. I'm glad today to have Louisa Westling, who's a member of the commission, with me. They are administratively supported by 3 employees, 2 of which are on extended leave and, to my understanding, may be retiring soon. And also, I was informed last night, the 3rd member of the staff informed me that she applied for and was accepted for promotion to another department. So pretty soon, in 2 weeks, it will be just me as a support staff in an acting capacity. So yes, there are issues. Now, let me see where. In response to the staff shortage last week, the governor detailed me to the position of director of the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission in an acting capacity until further notice. Furthermore, as a result of circumstances caused by the COVID-19 crisis, the GLAC offices at the ITC building in Tamuning were assigned to the Department of Public Health and Social Services for use by nurses. I plan to secure an office space at the ITC building with the assistance of the Department of Land Management and reopen the GALC hopefully this week. I spoke with Mr. Borja, who is the Director of Land Management, and he said that will be given office space on the 7th floor of the ITC building and on the 3rd floor, where the materials and records are currently stored in a room. So hopefully that'll be up and running this week. And then within 2 weeks, I'll have to, after the retirement and transfer of employees, I will have to start recruiting new staff for the Ancestral Lands Commission. Okay, in 2018, Public Law 34108 created the GLLC Survey, Infrastructure, and Development Fund, commonly referred to as a SID fund. The intention of this fund is for surveying, mapping, purchase, and installation of infrastructure, and for the administrative, operational, and financial support of these efforts. Based on the independent auditor's report for the year ended September 30, 2019, the following are the fund balances of the GALC. The Ancestral Lands Operation Fund is $1,496. The Land Bank Fund is $8,922,209. And the Landowners Recovery Fund is $5,003. And the Survey, Infrastructure, and Development Fund is $4,541,044. Total for in the fund balance is healthy. It is $13,469,752. Now, the proposed GALC budget submitted by BBMR to the legislature for FY 2021 excluded all funds from the general fund, allowing for a budget of $290,599 from the special fund or the SID fund. The result is a reduction of $87,524 from the GLLC's FY 2020 budget appropriations. A concern expressed by the GLC Board of Commissioners in the GLLC Resolution 2020-04 stated that the FY 2020 budget itself was not sufficient to effectively perform their duties. More specifically, they noted the lack of personnel, equipment, supplies, and services which are for legal, investment consultants, and management as required to accomplish GALC mandates and costs associated with surveys of properties under GALC jurisdiction, infrastructure, and development of land bank properties to the highest and best use. Therefore, I surmise that this proposed reduction in the GLC FY 2021 budget will severely restrict its ability to fulfill its mandates. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission FY 2021 budget, and I'm available for any questions, concerns, or comments.
Mr. Burge, I got a simple question. Are you saying then that the FY 2021 budget submitted by the Guam Ancestral Land Commission is not sufficient, or is it too much, or what? I was trying to understand.
Okay, yes.
You discussed
Senator.
2018 and so forth.
Yes, Senator. My understanding, it was submitted by BBMR on behalf of the Guam Ancestral Land Commission. And the current budget that we're under this year, this fiscal year, I read through various resolutions that the Lands Commission submitted or prepared and submitted, I understand, to the legislature, where they declared that the current budget is not sufficient for their needs. And then what I'm trying to explain is that the budget submitted for the upcoming fiscal year was cut. The general fund, GLAC, was removed entirely from the general fund. There are no general fund monies there. So the only funds that they were appropriating was from the SID funds, or the special funds, of $290,599. So yes, the concern, I have not, Luisa's here right now, but we have not met formally as a commission and as staff because the office has been shut down, basically because of the COVID-19 issues, and then the office is being reassigned for other purposes. So there has been difficulty, and I'm assuming that's why I was detailed over to the Ancestral Lands. So the issue there is the commission stated in their last resolution that the funds they have for this year, this fiscal year, is insufficient. And again, now the funds or the budget is being cut, extremely cut for this size. And what that does not allow, it allows for paying for office space, it allows for paying for salaries, and also for compensation for the commission members. But it does have a miscellaneous account. I have it written down here somewhere, but
But
it's
Mr.
not-
Birch, you do
Yes.
understand that this budget that we're entertaining is from the Ancestral Land Commission, from the governor's office.
Yes, I do understand that.
So you're going to be working with the governor's office. It's not
I
at
do.
this level yet, you know what I mean?
Right. Yes, Senator. Just letting you know what the facts are as I see it.
Yeah.
I wasn't part of the preparation of the budget, and these are generally the facts that I feel that the legislature should be made aware of. I don't want you or anybody else to be caught off guard on what is actually occurring there. And so what I've done is I've worked with and discussed issues with knowing that the government of Guam is going to be in a real tight spot now concerning the budget for the entire government. So I've been in discussion with Joe Borja at Land Management for him to assist with space and staffing to help to get the commission up and running. That is going to be for the short term, and I hope that this could be corrected over a period of time as soon as we get a commission quorum. At this time, we have 2 members. I believe I need 3 more for a quorum to work our way through this. So
All right.
I'm just informing you what the situation is today in case questions come up later on what's happening. So yes, the office will be reestablished with the assistance of Department of Land Management. And of course, I will be depending on them for staff support because the 3 staffers that the commission currently have, I expect will no longer be with the commission within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
All right. Okay, Mr. Birch. We're going to go ahead and skip all that. I'm going to allow you to go ahead and go back and work with the administration. Who you work with is not my concern. Just get it done. Because when your budget comes to us, we're not here to debate and know a history
Yes.
about ancestral land. As far as the history is concerned, I think most of our colleagues are well aware of it. It's a matter of discussing the numbers. Okay? So whatever
Okay.
issues you have with the administration, that'll be on you, not on us. I had a bunch of questions, but there's no sense asking it when we can't even discuss your budget. I would ask the oversight chair if she wants to entertain it. Other than that, you'll probably come back, just like land management will. Thank you. Senator Therese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hafaday, Mr. Birch, and Ms. Wessling, thank you for being here. This is the first I'm seeing on your letterhead, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vacancies on the commissioners.
Yes, Senator.
So how long have you been unable to have a quorum?
I've checked through the minutes, and the last minutes I found that were approved were in the month of February. So I'm assuming it's been around since the beginning of the COVID crisis around March.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that because of what occurred that replacements or reappointments have not been made, but contact has been made to try to bring us up to a quorum because otherwise we'll be at a standstill. And that's why I've been coordinating with land management for assistance
We
in this
just,
matter.
right before the pandemic, I don't remember the month, had the Ancestral Lands Commission in here talking about the AT&T settlement and
Yes.
things like that. And so I'm very surprised to hear about these vacancies on the commissioners, in the commission. But as to the budget, yes, so the 2020 appropriation was $378,000. The governor's request for this year was significantly less, $290,000. And now you're saying that, of course, this affects your ability to hire and function, but a lot of my questions were really about the number of staff and vacancies and things like that. But so when you say Department of Land Management is going to help you now, because one of the first things the governor did too was to separate ancestral lands from the Department of Land Management and the Chamorro Land Trust, but now you're saying you might have to go and the Department of Land Management is going to help you with the rent, or are you going to also be charged rent?
They will probably charge us rent, yes.
So they're just carving out a space for you, but you're still going to pay rent?
Yes, we will still have to pay rent.
Huh.
And of
Okay.
course, we will still have to pay for services for using, we have computers, but for using the internet access, and also for legal services, so those are necessary. Supplies, I'll have to figure a way around that because under the FY 2021 budget, a lot of that has been excluded because that used to be covered by the general fund, and now it's going to be exclusively under the special fund or the SID fund.
Yes, well,
And-
there was a significant reduction in contractual services in the budget request. The request
Yes.
itself is for much less, $25,000 less in contractual, which will affect your ability to pay attorney, I think.
Yes.
And your leases. It has gone from $5,000 in 2020 for supplies and materials to zero. And
Yes.
it's gone from $7,000 in 2020 for equipment to zero. And although you did get, I'm sorry, the request shows $1,000 more for office space rental. I don't know. This is very alarming to me this morning. I can't see how this commission is supposed to be, or is going to be able to do its job. We just finished, the commission just finished settling with AT&T, this huge, relieving them really of a big debt, I think, right,
Yes.
to the government of Guam, or to the ancestral lands owners.
And those funds
I'm-
were placed into the SID fund account?
Yes, so there, okay, so in part of the packet, there is a 2020 supplemental budget proposal request, it's called. That is for $2 million, if I'm not mistaken, yes, $2 million. But what is that document? I mean, this is a supplemental budget request included as part of the packet, but it's not really the budget request that was submitted to the legislature for its action.
Okay, my understanding, Senator, is that was a supplemental budget request that the commission, before many of the members were, their terms had expired, it was a request to attempt to use the funds from the AT&T settlement, which has been placed in the SID account, to make the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission autonomous. So it was kind of like a dream list, I understand what they came up with then, and it was submitted to the legislature. It's pretty much a dream list of what they wanted. I did not meet with those commission members, and of course the staff that worked on it are not reporting at this time to the Ancestral Lands Commission. So I did go over that myself, and yes, it is a huge amount, and it would drain the SID fund. And by touching those funds, I expect that there could be some kind of pushback from the heirs of the ancestral lands and the original owners
So
if we
it-
start touching those monies. So that is a very sensitive area.
So it was never resolved, right? That's not a
it's not been
formal
resolved.
commission request yet. Is that correct? Ms. Wesley?
Yeah.
If you could just say so on the record, so, because you're the only commissioner that's here that has been there for several years, yes.
Hold on so that they can turn on your mic. We'll make sure your mic's on, and please state your name so it's for the record.
Thank you. Louisa Westling, Commissioner for the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. Senators, thank you today for this opportunity to speak. Much change has occurred at the commission. in the past couple of months, all the way up to a few minutes ago, learning of loss of staff. For a while there, I felt like we were an orphaned commission, and I'm glad to have met our acting director, Mr. Birch, and assured that no, we are not orphaned, and that there is still light on the horizon, and that our commission will once again function. But to address your question, Senator Jalahi, on the proposed budget that the commission had voted on earlier this year, as far as a proposed budget for budget 2021. It was, in essence, a wish list, as Acting Director Birch had mentioned, faced with the information that we were going to be moving towards possible autonomy, that we would need to stand on our own feet, that we would need to have our own office and not continue to ride on the hospitality of the Department of Land Management. And also, in order to carry out the tasks that the commission was originally mandated to do, to return lands to the rightful owners and families and heirs, to develop and make productive the properties that were vested with the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, to know what inventory we had, which would requiring surveying of the properties. We came up with what our future goals would be, and what we would need to carry out those goals to achieve our purpose, which in essence is to serve the dispossessed owners and to return the properties to those who have been waiting for decades to help right an injustice. And so based on the information and premise that we will have to be not dependent on the government to stand on our own, we came up with a proposed budget as to what we would need in order to achieve that goal, from staffing to paying rent, paying for legal fees, professional services in the way of survey, possible money set aside for a development of the lands that the Guam Ancestral Lands had. And while this would not be all expended in a one-year period, they were all projections as to what we potentially would need. Come this year, March 19th, the COVID-19, so much has changed. So now we are just at really faced with finding a place to operate and staff.
But you had secured office space after they separated you from land management previously, but now it's taken over by public health?
That is correct. During the lockdown for the COVID-19 crisis, I was informed by our former director that that the space that we had there in the Records Department was no longer ours, and that the Department of Public Health and Social Services, in response to the pandemic, would be occupying that space to set up headquarters. And so from that point on, I really didn't know where we would be.
All right, and so you think that's a permanent adjustment?
As far as our...
Public health.
I don't know if that's a permanent thing or not at this point, but I understand that we will have some kind of space that Director Birch here has been able to work out with the Director of Land Management.
All right, and so, Mr. Birch, you've said that you've got 3 employees, or you've had 3 employees. You may be losing all of them within 2 to 3 weeks.
Yes.
Did you have an ASO, Administrative Services Officer, or someone who does the finances?
No. We depended on one of the land agents. We have only 2 land agents and an executive director. And one of the land agents multitasked and filled all of those responsibilities.
And is that land agent still there?
She is. She gave me her notice the other day that she received, she applied for and received acceptance for promotion to another department.
Okay,
So-
well, that's sad news,
It
Billy.
is.
I don't want to see the ancestral lands go backwards. But I was going to ask some of the concerns that are remaining is from, the 2019 audit on the ancestral lands that was done. It's pretty much, the deficiencies that were cited have to do with just, incomplete recording of collections, untimely bank reconciliations, undeposited cash balance, receivables were not updated, operational expenditures and appropriations not reported in the financial statements. It's kind of a reporting issues, but also, I was going to ask you, we have not been able to access your website either. Is that a casualty of this loss of staff, or, yeah? Are you aware of the website status?
I'm not, Senator. I've done my research by going to other resources, knowing that we don't have an office there. So,
Oh, my.
so I've been able to do that. I have not been able to access a website. My understanding is the last website they have, if on the letterhead, is adequate here. It still says the website is Department of Land Management, Gov Guam. So I'm assuming that is the website. That's still on the letterhead.
Okay, all right. Well, it's just concerning that the request was for significantly less while we're still having these challenges. I don't
Yes.
necessarily agree that the money that's being made on these leases are going to go totally to operations. I don't think we need to expand operations on, unnecessarily. However, we do need to do, at least the bare minimum to get the benefit that this commission is supposed to be giving to ancestral property owners, to get that benefit to them. So it is very concerning.
Yes.
But thank you for your
And
effort.
thank
All
you,
right.
Senator.
John,
Yes.
do us a favor. Take your budget, whatever was submitted to us, take it back to the administration, work it out with BBMR, figure out what your number's gonna be, and I'll ask for you to come back, like I've asked land management to come back, and then make sure that we get a copy of the documents, and also provide a copy to your oversight.
Oversight.
We don't need to discuss any further. You don't have enough. You're separated. Something should have happened. It didn't happen. Let's move on. All right?
Thank you, Senator.
And we'll see you at a later date.
Thank you, Senator. That's all we could ask for now.
This will suspend the budget hearing with the Ancestral Land Commission. Thank you, Mr. Birch, and ma'am. Thank you,
Thank you,
Madam
Senators.
Commissioner. Sergeant Arms, if you can call in, please, the Chamorro Land Trust, and let's move on to the next group.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergeant Arms. We are now at the Chamorro Land Trust Commission part. Those testifying on behalf of the department or the agency, which is the Chamorro Land Trust, the commission. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read. Lengthy testimony should be summarized. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. We're talking about budget year 2021. And we may dip into 2020, but we'll try to avoid doing that. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony. You are being asked right now to stay for questions or for additional testimony that may be desired by the members of the committee. Proper form of decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form of decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony or may be asked to leave or be escorted or removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and title for the record. The Sergeant Arm has already sworn you in. A reminder, Mr. Haddock, you are the Director of Chamorro Land Trust. We were going to discuss, please do your presentation and identify who you're with. You're for budget year 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hafaday, Senator San Agustin, distinguished members of the Committee on Appropriations. I am Jack Hattick III, and I'm the Administrative Director of the Chamorro Land Trust. To my left is Mr. Joey Cruz. He is the Program Coordinator 3, and he handles our administrative and financial services. Thank you very much for allowing us to appear to present the budget request for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission for fiscal year 2021. As indicated in our budget request, we do have an appropriation from the general fund of $45,000, from the CLTC Operations Fund, an appropriation of $905,241, and an appropriation of $313,368 from the CLTC Survey and Infrastructure and Development Fund, for a grand total of $1,263,609. For the past, since February of 2019, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission has been a separate entity and agency from the Department of Land Management and the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. We do have separate office spaces that were indicated, and we are at the ITC building on the second floor. So we have separate, before we were co-located together, so we do have separate offices since October of 2019. I'm here to also report that through the COVID-19 pandemic, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission was closed for a period of time from March 16, and we reopened operations on 1 June. However, we did have essential employees that were reporting to conduct financial and payroll services. During that time, the Department of Public Health did temporarily take the place of our offices temporarily. So they did come and utilize our offices for records and for 2 other divisions within public health in support of the pandemic. So we're happy to report that since June 1st, obviously we have control over our office space, and we are now operating with the conditions set forth by the Department of Public Health and Social Services, social distancing, and all other mandatory requirements. Although our revenue collections were mildly affected during the COVID-19, we anticipate that we are going to receive the upward trend of our collections because we have a fixed revenue in nature, and so we anticipate that especially the revenues collected from our leases will be paid by our constituents. And also, we have not issued any, in terms of our commercial leasing and licensing, we have not issued any abatements or any temporary restrictions of payments or of that nature. So we are on course to collect our revenue, and an updated revenue generation was shared monthly up until the April month. We are working to provide you with May due to the COVID pandemic and the subsequent months after that to keep you and the administration informed of our revenue collections. I would like to inform the committee of a prior year obligation that we did submit as part of our budget request because we had an employee that had a Civil Service Commission settlement, and so that's a prior year obligation that we had that we had set forth with the budget request in the amount of $30,314.16, and I believe we've communicated and written letters to the legislature to that effect. Currently, right now, we have 13 staff members. I have 9 land agent positions. I have a program coordinator 3, an administrative assistant, a records management officer currently. And we do have an agreement with the Department of Land Management in which we are sharing employees because of the nature of their work. As Director Borja did allude to in his testimony, 2 of CLTC's employees are being shared temporarily so that we can augment our specific operations. And 1 employee from the Department of Land Management is serving as a land agent supervisor because as the staffing pattern does indicate, we do not have a mid-level supervisor for the land agents. So currently I serve as their supervisor for those purposes. And without any further questions, or before we have questions, I'll turn it over to Program Coordinator Joey Cruz.
You have anything you want to present, Joey?
No, Senator.
All right. Mr. Haddock, your budget that's submitted, you have no problem with it right now?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. You already identified a retro of a salary for some of your employees. You're going to settle that?
Yes, sir.
And how's your, I'm not even going to ask you about your collection because you've already identified that. I don't have any other questions. Senator Therese, do you have any questions for Chamorro Land Trust Commission?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Hattick and Mr. Cruz. A couple questions. So the governor's request and your request are the same, and it's an increase of 21%, or about $215,000 for 21 versus FY20.
Yes, ma'am.
It looks like these increases are composed of 54,000 in personnel, 46,000 in contractual, 73,000 in equipment, and 48,000 in capital outlay. Could you just, it says, can you detail what these are for? It says for capital outlay and equipment that these are for laptops, desktops, tablets, UPS, batteries, and a server.
Yes.
Is that correct, or are there other items?
That's correct, Senator. As detailed in our budget submission, our laptops are reaching or have reached already their shelf life, and so we need a revitalization of our equipment to keep pace with the technological efforts. Also, we would like to go out into the field and give our land agents better equipment, obviously, to conduct GPS location coordinates and things of that nature. So we had indicated in our budget request for such equipment.
All right, but these look like you want them to come out of the CLTC Survey, Infrastructure, and Development Fund, which
Yes.
by statute is restricted for the subdivision, surveying, mapping, and registration of tracts of residential and agricultural land.
Yes, ma'am.
So do you believe these items fit that purpose?
These items are regularly used to provide information for the surveying. A lot of our software items, such as the GIS and LIS and other software items, are also on these computer systems. And so we reasoned that it would be prudent to put it on the Survey and Infrastructure Fund because they do support, integrally support the survey function.
But will this get us any additional surveys to be done this year? Because I'm sure that was the purpose of that fund.
Correct. Yes, it's our anticipation because we did include an additional $41,000 as far as surveys are concerned. So we're hoping that that's going to move the process. That will move the process forward to get our surveying done.
So how much surveying do you expect to get done with the $41,000 you're saying?
Well, that's also dependent upon the actual cost of the surveys per the size of the land that we want to do. So obviously, we're going to maximize every opportunity to survey as much as we can, given the amount that we've requested.
Yeah, can you give me an estimate based on your experience? You guys have been doing this for a long time. One survey, my understanding, yeah, what was your average cost? Or just describe a tract of land and what we can expect. It doesn't seem like enough. That's why I'm asking.
Of
If you
course.
could just describe how far you think that 41,000 is going to go.
We anticipate that perhaps, and this is a conservative estimate, that there may be 100 surveys may be performed. Again, we're working with the Department of Land Management, obviously, to try to, because they are the only territorial surveyor. So we're working on an opportunity for us to work together on these surveys. But that's a conservative estimate.
Were any surveys completed in FY20
Let's see.
for Chamorro Land Trust properties?
Currently, right now, there are three surveys that are to be performed for Chamorro Land Trust specifically.
3 to be completed, you're saying, by the end of the fiscal year?
That's the anticipation.
And how much did those cost? The 3? Mr. Cruz, you can,
Currently, because we work with the Department of Land Management, there was no cost associated with those surveys.
so you're assigning your personnel there and they are helping land management with the surveys, and in exchange, they don't charge you for the surveys?
Correct, and we work on a case-by-case basis, obviously, and a lot of it also is pursuant to our commercial tracts of land, because those help bring in money and revenue to the trust to help sustain its operations.
I'm sorry, repeat that part about the commercial? What was it?
They also help us commercial properties. We can realize our commercial properties.
What are the 3 tracts that are being surveyed?
I know currently one is slated for lot 157. That's the Weddingale Rugby Field, and that's to help resolve the longstanding conflict between the two incorporated entities.
And
So that's
part of
one.
your settlement was that you were going to bear the cost of the survey?
That us in bearing the cost of the surveys.
For the Weddingale and the
For
rugby?
the
this-
associated tracts that are there, the lots that are there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are the other 2 being surveyed?
I'm sorry?
You said there were 3 lots being
Yeah,
surveyed?
there's a lot for Guam Rugby, there's a lot for House Angels, and then there's a Chamorro Land Trust lot that's adjacent that is affected, the survey is affected.
So you're saying those are what you're counting as the 3 surveys being done for FY20?
Currently, right now, yes.
No residential tracts?
Not to my knowledge yet.
All right, there's also an increase of $46,000 or 51% in contractual service in FY21. Are there increases in contractual services in both?
For the SID fund, there is, as detailed in our BBMR 96A form, there's surveying, advertisements, vehicle maintenance and repairs, and land registration. In FY 2020, we didn't have a budget appropriation from the SID fund. So that's the increase.
But, okay, so repeat again, what you're going to pay out of this fund that was not paid last year?
For surveying services, advertisement, vehicle maintenance and repairs, and land registration.
Advertisement, vehicle registration?
Vehicle
The
maintenance?
Survey Infrastructure and Development Fund?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I'm looking pretty much the desktops, batteries, and the server. All right. You're expecting this money, then the 46,000, to help in the land registration?
A variety of expenses, also in surveying, advertising, vehicle maintenance, and also the land registration.
Surveying,
Yes, ma'am.
is that separate from what we just discussed, the 3 surveys?
No, ma'am, it's the same.
Okay. All right, so he said that would take 40, oh, I don't, do you have those broken down?
Yes, ma'am.
How much for the surveying?
For the surveying, we appropriated 41,000.
All right, that's the 41 we talked about.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay, from the land inventory, FY19 financial audit, it says CLTC has an updated land inventory of 11,668 acres, of which 3,274 is unregistered property. And the law prohibits any leasing and use until a title of ownership established through judicial land registration. I know that we, in the last term, had a hearing with the AG regarding updating on, to update us on the land registrations that they were doing for the CLTC properties. And at that point, they said they were going to complete all land registrations for all property that had been surveyed. So could you just tell us, can you just update us on that? Have all those surveyed properties been registered?
Currently, we still have some unregistered property that are still pending. We can provide you with a listing of the tracts of property that are still pending land registration.
And those are already surveyed? Just
We-
waiting for legal action?
We need to verify.
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Distinguish between those that are not surveyed, because then that's kind of on you, you need to survey, right? And versus the ones that are just waiting for legal action, waiting for the Attorney General's office to complete the
We
survey.
can provide that information to you, Senator.
Yes. Are you aware of any being completed during FY20?
No, not at this time.
As of FY 2019, CLTC's leased 3,000 acres. No, okay, let me take that back. And just wanted to confirm, is the CLTC settlement that was reached in the case with the federal government or the U.S. housing, I think it was, do you expect any cost to your budget because of that settlement?
Yes, Senator, I think that the change in the qualification is going to ultimately result in an influx in constituent applications, and so I believe that there will be an inherent cost increase. However, of course, that wasn't submitted with the initial budget request because the settlement had not been officially reached and announced at that time.
So what are you saying? Are you expecting to change your budget, or what are you expecting is going to happen?
Of course, we will be discussing with the administration and the legislature what kind of changes are going to be made, and at that point, we would know what we need to adjust as far as our budget is concerned.
I don't understand. What are the costs of the settlement?
Well, at this time, we're still determining what those costs may be. Because, like I said, I anticipate that there will be an influx in applications. So obviously, there's going to be a need for perhaps an additional manpower to handle such an influx. So that might be one, but I don't know what that is at this time. We're still discussing that.
All right. I was under the impression that part of the settlement was that there would be no payment by the government of Guam.
Of course, I did not speak about any kind of payment that would be made to anyone. I'm just talking about overall personnel costs since you brought up the question.
All right. And so are you expecting personnel changes during FY21?
Currently, right now, the only changes that I have are we just had the recent departure of Land Agent 1 through resignation, and more recently an announcement was just given by my records management officer that he received a promotion to another department. So those are the only anticipated changes in the FY21 moving forward.
The cost that you allocated, Mr. Cruz, from this survey infrastructure fund for registration, you said, which parts of that list you say go for registration of the land?
For land registration,
Yes.
We request an appropriation of $4,400 for land registration.
What is that?
Land registration?
No, I mean, what are you going to be paying with that $4,000? What do you mean?
It could be for the expense that may arise for like the abstracting of title for a specific parcel. So if
Who are you paying for the abstract of title?
we may pay DLM if they require payment for the abstract.
Okay. I don't know. I thought that all was taken care of in the whole land registration. Once you guys have it surveyed, is a responsibility of land management to take care of. I guess I'm just confused. These all sound like operational costs that are being charged to this fund that's supposed to be very clearly for surveying. You know, that's a big issue. Mr. Chair, if I could reserve to come back, I'd like to ask the chairperson of the commission regarding the settlement. So if after questions for the panel, then she could be invited in to answer them.
No, Senator Therese, there's only going to be two, the director and their finance person. Any other information you may need, you can get the information, but I'm only going to allow the two. I've allowed that already for a week and a half. We're not going to change now.
But
Not
they
for
can
them.
trade off, Mr. Chair, right? That's been allowed. I've seen that. So.
Was that? No, it hasn't been allowed. Do you have any other questions of the panel? And we can move along. Do you have any more questions?
No, yeah, I'd like to ask them to the chair, yeah.
Who?
The chairperson of the board, when they switch off.
You're asking for the chair. I already told you, the director's here. You can ask him all the questions you want.
Okay, well, I did
Yeah.
ask him for the settlement, and I'd like to, the chairperson is the one who settled and is familiar with the cost, so I just wanted.
All right, then, Mr. Hattick, then you would have to step out and would ask the chair to come in. You need to start taking charge of that, Jack, but go ahead. Go ahead and step out and have the chairperson come in. And let's see what she's going to give in addition, and we'll move along. All right, Jack?
Okay. Thank you.
No. Yeah, who did you want, Senator Therese? Because you got one shot. Who's coming in? And then we're going to move on to the questions. We have other colleagues that want to
I
ask
was
questions.
just saying, yeah, let my colleagues ask questions
Okay,
to
they'll
this
ask
panel,
questions,
and
and
at
then
the
we'll
end,
move
if you
on.
can invite the chairperson in to answer any additional questions that are not answered, yes.
No, not with all of them. There will only be two. This will not turn into a circus.
Are
Okay.
are these questions pertaining to the budget? I'm just.
Yes, the
Okay.
impact of the settlement on the budget.
Oh, I
Correct.
see. Because as I indicated before, this budget submission was given prior to the announcement of the settlement agreement, so that's why we don't have any specifics in the budget. So
That's
I'm not
right.
sure what other information can be provided at this time when we're still trying to ascertain what what the settlement agreement is going to, the impact the settlement agreement is going to have on the budget. Because I just provided a cursory observation, that's all, and in a response to your question. I don't have anything specific with regards to the settlement agreement. Specifically, that's why I'm just sticking to the budget submission.
Right, well, these budget submissions for all agencies are submitted earlier in the year, and so by the time we have these hearings, of course, we want to hear what's been updated. What are the adjustments that, we just saw two departments leave here without even receiving any questions because they said their budgets were out of whack and they had to come back and redo the whole thing. So what we want to know is just what the updates are, that's it,
So
and what impacts were not foreseen when you submitted this, of course.
So are we at the same juncture then as the previous two agencies? Do you want us to go back and reassess
No,
an
Jack,
unforeseen?
do you have any update to the questions she's asking on the settlement? Do you have any answers to that?
I don't have any specifics as to any kind of budgetary impact that the settlement would have. Like I said, because the budget request was submitted prior to the settlement's announcement, so I don't have any information.
So the settlement will have no impact at all to your budget request?
At this time, at this budget request, no.
Okay, Senator Therese, do you have any other questions you want to pose on him? All right. Madam Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Administrative Director Hattig and Joey Cruz. Jack, can you tell me, what is this settlement? Can you give the people of Guam a history of the settlement and where we stand today?
Well, as Senator
And what is
Solis-
the settlement called? Because we're talking settlement, but what is the settlement called?
Frankly, Senator, I'm sorry I wasn't prepared to discuss the settlement as for the information that was provided for today's budget submission. I was not present at the negotiation of the settlement, and Senator Therese is correct. The chairperson at the time, currently right now, was present, so she would be able to speak more clearly about exactly the settlement itself.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, if I humbly request, I know we sent the
No,
individuals, but after we're done doing questions, if we can move forward with that question and call the proper individual in. There was by the oversight chair, there was a mention of $41,000 for surveys. And in fiscal year 20, there's only 3 surveys to be performed, which was Weddingale, the Rugby Association, the House Angels. That's the field, right?
Yes, because we did not receive an appropriation from the Survey and Infrastructure Fund in the FY20 budget.
Okay, and then the CLTC lot. What is the CLTC lot?
I'm sorry, say again, the CLTC?
You mentioned the 3rd survey would be the Chamorro Land Trust lot. What is this lot? Where is this located?
It's located adjacent to the rugby and Weddingale fields in the Weddingale vicinity.
And what would be the purpose for this lot?
As part of the settlement agreement, an easement was created, and the easement is going to have bearing onto the property, the CLTC property.
Okay, thank you. And now for this $41,000 for surveys, what do you have planned to survey for FY21?
It's our intent to assess. Currently, we're conducting a land inventory. So what the project entails is to identify an agricultural tract and a residential tract. So as soon as we identify those tracts and have a clear understanding of the lots, we can identify those lots for survey.
So the $41,000 is going to be used to perform an analysis on what would...
No, they're for the survey. We're performing the analysis as we speak. It doesn't have anything to do with the analysis. That's our current function, but the money is set aside so that we can pay for the surveys once we've determined that.
Are these residential lots already given to people that are occupying the property, or are these that are being surveyed? Let me rephrase that. It seemed really broken. You said that the $41,000 is going to be used to survey agricultural land, agricultural lots, and residential lots.
They may be used
Are
for that
they
purpose.
being occupied right now by families or any of the
We
people-
do have pre-occupants of the properties, but right now there's no assertion that that money would be used for people that are occupying already.
So what land, like the location of each land, because you already performed the analysis of agricultural land and residential land,
It's currently being performed, yes.
where is the land located?
We have an agricultural tract that we are doing a land inventory in Jigo, and that's tract 10-121.
Okay,
And then we are identifying a residential tract along East Hengsong, tract 1022, the residential tract. That's commonly known as the Swamp Road area along East Hengsong.
okay. And after it is surveyed, what is the plan for these lots?
Well,
Or these
obviously,
tracts?
it's the hope that we can provide survey of these areas so we can lease the properties out, so we can issue leases. So as a result, if we do the survey, if the government conducts the survey, the individual lessee has to pay the property taxes upon consummation of the lease. So that's something that a factor that we're considering. But if the lessee or the applicant performs the survey, then they get a 7-year abatement from paying the property tax because they performed the survey. So it's a revenue generating opportunity for us if we can, because if we get them to pay for their property taxes a little earlier, we can generate some money.
So what is the plan after the survey is complete? I'm sorry.
To issue leases?
To who?
Yes.
To the people that currently occupy the property?
Not necessarily, ma'am. Like I said, there are many considerations that need to be made in the determination of occupying property and not occupying. We would have to do the research and find out if do they have a claim to that property, and to make sure that all of the documentation is, make sure that it's current and accurate before we can issue a lease to a pre-occupier.
Okay. So it's to be determined.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Sorry, that's the short answer.
And the SID fund is meant to go towards surveying, mapping, water, installing water and utilities, other utilities. And you mentioned there are some areas that people are occupying that are Chamorro Land Trust property that families live on that have no access to water, no access to proper sewage or even a septic tank. How is the money going to be used for helping the people of Guam realize to get water and sewage septic tank or connection to
Obviously, we
sewer
have
system?
to work in coordination with our utility agencies to assist us to find out what the cost would be. And we have to develop a comprehensive approach to see how we can best use these monies appropriately for that purpose.
So in the prior administration, there has not been a comprehensive approach on how to assist the people of Guam who are currently living on the property?
Not to my knowledge. When I took over, I didn't see any comprehensive plan, and so we're attempting to develop one.
Have you received any instruction by the administration to help the people or find out a way if we can do a comprehensive approach to help these people who are currently in the land with no water and no sewage
Yes.
connection? How far along are you in the study?
We are still continuing to talk to the utility agencies primarily, and obviously the Department of Land Management to have the surveys done, or if we contract the surveys out ourselves with the money that's been appropriated, then that's how we can work together to make sure that happens. So we've made appropriate inroads, and we'd like to continue working so that we can get something accomplished.
What has the utilities, the water agencies, what is the dialogue? How is their response? Are they going to offer the government a special rate because the government will be paying for the installation through the SID fund, or has there been any discussing cost? Or even a pilot program for...
I'm not aware of any special rate that may be offered, but certainly that could be discussed. We did receive the shape files for where utilities are currently located, so we can put the utilities where they're located and where our properties are, and we can mesh the two so that we can have an overlay of where we need to expand. But the last conversation that we had with utilities is their expansion is based on the need or on the consumer. So wherever their consumer pays to have the infrastructure put in, then that's where they expand. So that's why I'm hoping to work on a comprehensive approach using the monies appropriated to provide for that.
When do you anticipating to start on this comprehensive approach?
Well, with all things being considered about the COVID-19, we're really focused on being safe and getting past this. But as soon as we return to a sense of degree of normalcy with the government as far as the pandemic is concerned, we should be able to move forward with something.
I don't feel comfortable that we're resting on this COVID-19 impact for us to move forward with a comprehensive study. I think there's going to be a new normal, and so we have to adapt and improvise. And so I hope that we move forward soon. There's a lot of people that are suffering on our island and who are on these properties that can be assisted. We're doing things for the community. That's very good. The surveying of the Weddingale Rugby Association and the House Angels Field. I mean, those are good things. But there are many, many families who do not have access to water and do not have access to proper sewage. And I think that's where we need to focus in light of COVID-19, because what is the first thing they tell us? Wash your hands.
Right.
And if they don't have access to water, then we're putting them at risk as well. So I look forward, Mr. Director, to something hopefully by the end of the year, because who knows what's going to happen next year.
Yes, ma'am.
And to have some kind of, at least some kind of start.
We'll continue to work
Forward
hard.
momentum. Thank you, Mr. Director, and thank you, Mr. Cruz.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Senator Tello, you have any questions?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon, Jack, and good afternoon, Mr. Cruz. Thank you for taking the time to be out here.
Ma'am.
I'm just going to go directly to the finances regarding the special funds that you anticipate at 305,537. Is that correct, Jack?
Can I ask which part of the digest you're reading from, Senators?
I'm actually looking at the budget that was submitted to us from your office, the summary report.
Oh, the summary?
In the special funds, how much are you requesting for from special funds? We know that you're getting 45,000 from the general fund, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so on special funds, how much are you getting there? Oh, I'm not incorporating the telephone and sewer, so it could be a little bit more than 305. So how much total?
I have 1,218,609.
Okay, there. Yeah, you're also incorporating certain capital outlay as such. Okay, in this, and where does this special fund come from? The funding? Is this a...
This is the CLTC Survey Infrastructure and Development Fund.
Okay, and because you're requesting that, Matt, are you seeing...
I'm sorry, and then there's another special fund, it's the Operations Fund, sorry. So,
Right, the survey fund, right? That's
right,
where the
and
money's
then
coming from?
There's two there.
There's
that
two of
total
them.
was encompassing both funds, ma'am.
Both special funds. Can you give me the names of those special funds again, please?
Again, the CLTC Operations Fund
Okay,
and the CLTC Survey Infrastructure and Development Fund.
and the operations fund, where is that money, how is that generating funding in that account?
I'll have Joey, because
Thanks,
he
Joey.
manages the accounts.
The revenue source for the CLTC operations funds are all commercial licenses executed prior to October 2015. Every other commercial license that was executed after October 2015 and forward and after is the revenue source for the CLTC Survey Infrastructure and Development Fund.
Okay, and the other fund, the survey fund?
Yes, ma'am.
That's it? Okay. Now, do you see, because of the COVID, do you see any changes in that fund at all?
The collection may be delayed, but because the commission has not granted any rent abatements, we are still issuing invoices on a monthly basis, and the commission feels that there's sufficient time, even going into the next fiscal year, that collections will be made.
So you don't think there's going to be any kind of shortage in that fund?
Maybe a delay in collections, but shortage we will recover in the next fiscal year.
Okay. So you think you'll recover in the next fiscal year? So you're not going to ask for an adjustment on and ask money from the general fund to cover any kind of shortage then?
No.
Okay. If you guys can handle that, that's great news. Have you had any recent hires since 2020?
No, ma'am.
No recent hires?
No.
Now, there's a section on legal. There's an MOU. If you go to, these pages aren't numbered, I'm sorry, I would give you a page number, but there's a section that talks about the MOU with the legal services. And it was requested in 2020 for $41,054. And then there's no request for legal services for 2021. Why is that?
That budget request was moved to be covered by the general fund, which is the 45,000 appropriation request we have.
Okay, so that's all that it is in that section right there, right? It just goes to the general fund?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
As indicated in the budget digest, the $41,054, that's the contractual services for legal.
Was that done in 2019
I believe
and
so.
2018? Okay,
Yes,
so it
ma'am.
all stems from that money.
Yes.
Okay. The other one is, do you have any retirees coming up? All the employees there, other than yourself, Mr. Hectic, are all classified employees, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have any retiring this coming? Well, you did mention someone for 2021, right?
Right.
That's leaving, but anybody else?
I At this time, we do have 2 that are eligible to retire, but they have announced their intention, they're not intending to retire.
2 right now,
Yes.
okay. So in 2019, how many residential property leases have you issued out in 2019?
I'm sorry, Senator, I don't have that number with me. It wasn't included as part of the budget request.
So in 2020, we have 0, right, for residential? But 2019, you don't have those numbers. In 2020, this year, you're showing only 3 commercial, but no residential, correct? That's what was mentioned earlier?
Well, those are just surveys. Those weren't leases or commercial
Or
leases.
commercials,
They were just
nothing?
surveys,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. So is there any kind of, so there are any leases at all that was issued out for 2020 or 2019 for commercial
If
or
you're talking
residential?
about residential or agricultural, I don't have the numbers. I can get them to you.
Okay, okay. Because, you know, in your budget that's submitted, you have these workload outputs, you know, that you implement. And, you know, the establishment or accomplishment of these individuals are, you know, justifiable with your budget.
Okay.
You know, and I know there's a substantial change in 2020 because of the COVID crisis that we're moving through, and it sounds like you might be submitting anything else later on. I think you should also change that workload indicator as well, moving forward. The last question I have is, how much money are you planning on? I know you have capital outlay, but how much of that is going to be towards IT capabilities and working in that direction?
I know that we're trying to become independent of the DLM data server. So that's one thing about our IT that we're trying to get separated is if we can purchase a server of our own, we can hold the information and store securely and safely our information on our own server. And so that's something that we've committed to doing as far as our IT. And we're also working with OTEC to try to see if we can gain access to be able to change our website currently, because right now the jurisdiction over our website is still connected to DLM. And so those are 2 priorities that I know of in the IT realm that we would be willing to commit our budget to moving forward.
So you haven't put any money aside for that?
Well, right now we're still ascertaining exactly what the cost is going to be, because we've certain services we're
Jack,
still
I think,
together.
you know, I think you should at least work towards something like that. It's more
Yes, ma'am.
cost efficient, you know, working with IT capabilities and, you know, a lot of work, data information mapping, all that has to be done
We
correctly.
did indicate our 14 computers and our laptops so that we can go into the field and we can be better prepared in the field moving forward, and our GPS coordination. So that's something that is part of our IT infrastructure that we're hoping to improve.
But if you can utilize Department of Land Management services and what they have, right, what you're doing right now, you're going hand in hand using them. I don't see why that, you know, the separation is so important with Chamorro Land Trust. I mean, you have your job responsibilities and what you need to do, but I think it also has to do with, you know, cost savings for your agency and getting those leases out and getting those surveys done that's needed for individuals to be able to have a home to live on, you know, and I mean, that's your whole purpose in it. But I've never been the fan of separating Chamorro Land Trust and Ancestral from Department of Land Management because it was basically in your favor to be under that umbrella. You know, because they were able to cover, they had a bigger budget than you do, and they're able to cover a lot of expenses so that you can do your job and you know, issue out these leases to those families that need it. So I really hope that maybe there's a change, because we're already seeing with ancestral lands, you know, they're hurting as well, that maybe to incorporate the agencies back into Department of Land Management for the sole purpose to help with finances and moving forward. And I also recommend you to really start looking into the IT capabilities Technology is moving quickly, it's an opportunity, and it's becoming even more cost efficient, not only to utilize it, but also to gain access to it as well. So I thank you again, gentlemen, for being here today and providing your testimony. Thank you,
ma'am.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Senator Sabina, do you have any questions of the Chamorro Land Trust folks?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Jack, and good morning, Mr. Cruz. Thank you for being here for this budget hearing. So there is something in the objectives that you submitted in the budget where CLTC aims to work with Department of Administration developing a system to manage leases, licenses, payments, and vendors. What is the current manner in which CLTC monitors or oversees all this information?
It's right here.
Currently, we utilize a financial software.
Excuse me, Joey, can you speak into the mic closer? Thank you.
Currently, we use the financial system QuickBooks to monitor our revenue collections, to monitor our receivables and everything in that nature. Any information we need regarding real property taxes, we request from the Department of Revenue and Taxation. We usually request that information towards the end of the year.
Yeah, you answered my second question regarding taxes. You went ahead and answered the second question about how do you keep track of the taxes for properties, because we had Department of Revenue and Taxation here the other day, and that's one thing that they're going to do is they're going to look for taxes on CLTC properties that were not covered. So are you aware of that? That's one of their objectives.
I know that that's a continuing objective of the Revenue and Taxation Department.
Okay. And how would that affect your budget? I mean, do you have an estimate of how that would affect your budget in looking at this? Or would it affect your budget?
It would affect our revenue collection. It would increase it, which would provide us more financial resources in the future to expend to address the concerns of infrastructure, surveying, and things of that nature.
Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to find out was, so you mentioned about prior obligations, the 30,000. Is that the only one that's outstanding?
We were just informed of a Competitive Wage Act reevaluation for a Planner 2. So that's one more prior year obligation that needs to be addressed, but we were just informed of that recently.
Okay. Would that mean you would have to readjust your budget considerably or minor adjustments?
I don't think it would be a considerable adjustment. It would be a moderate adjustment to our budget.
Okay. So in the special funds that you outlined here, so do you see a major impact with the any changes from the pandemic? Do you see perhaps, I mean, you were mentioning there's possibly a delay in receiving the revenues, but do you anticipate any changes as far as reductions in revenues?
As of today, we have not received any requests from any commercial constituents requesting any type of deferral or abatement, nor has the board have granted any such actions. So we don't foresee only a delay we foresee, but any decrease we don't foresee, other than if the lease should expire.
Okay.
We
thank you.
continued to receive payments during the COVID-19, so we were able to process our revenues.
Okay, thanks. And then in one of the line items, it mentions miscellaneous 7,200 for stipends. Can you explain what the stipend program is?
The stipends are paid to the board members for their monthly meetings. Sometime by law, they're required to meet once a month, but they can meet twice a month. So that's our projection for the stipends.
Okay, thanks. And so there's another line item here for 41,054 for legal services that was placed under general fund.
Yes.
You know, oddly enough, that was the same amount for surveys put under I believe, the SID fund. Is that just a coincidence that the numbers are exactly the same?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Okay.
to my knowledge, there's no relation.
Okay. So in regards to legal services, my understanding that was for the settlement purposes. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
The legal services that you have itemized here, is that for the settlement purposes, or what was the legal services for?
Those are for our attorney, the attorneys.
Okay, that's right.
We share attorneys with the Department of Land Management and the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, and that's for our portion of the shared cost.
And another question I just want to follow up on regarding successional planning. So I believe in one of my visits, I feel like there's a need for more surveyors. I mean, do you find that that's the case? Do we need to hire more surveyors to get all these properties surveyed?
Currently, right now, it's extremely hard to compete with, we only have one territorial surveyor, and that's with the Department of Land Management. And it's difficult to recruit surveyors based on what they're currently paid right now. But certainly an item that should be discussed and can be discussed in the budget process, obviously, moving forward. It would aid us if the Chamorro Land Trust did have its own territorial surveyor. Obviously, it would aid us in performing those surveys and making sure that we could do them in a timely manner and a cost-efficient manner.
Okay, and then regards to procurement, so how many staff do you have that have completed all 4 modules at GCC?
Zero.
0, okay, then
Yeah,
how do you go
currently-
about procurement?
Currently, right now, we have 2 staff that are scheduled to attend the first procurement module.
Okay.
They are members of the administrative staff, Joey, and another member of our staff.
Okay, that's great to hear. But yeah, I do want to encourage you to continue on with the progress of that. And as far as RFPs, do you have any RFPs that you plan to put out, because that requires the full training?
From my understanding, the Guam Economic Development Authority has issued 3 RFPs for commercial properties, Chamorro Land Trust commercial properties. But other than that, I don't anticipate an issuing of any other RFP for any services or purchases.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for answering my questions, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think we wrapped up all the questions for you folks, and then we're going to bring in Ms. Pika Farron in. I already spoke to her outside. That being said, Jack and Joey, thank you for your participation. And we'll now speak to Ms. Pika Farron and the current chairperson. And then we'll discuss about the settlement. But as far as the budget is concerned, it's pretty much wrapped up.
Mr. Chair, could I just
Thank
ask
you.
one question as to the status? I'm not sure if to you or to Joey. The FY19 financial audit noted that the special revenue fund collections totaling $404,000 were recorded. However, no cash transfers were made to the respective fund accounts. This is for the CLTC Survey Infrastructure and Development Fund. So I wanted to know, it looks like also in your October 2019 minutes, it says there's a delay by DOA in depositing into these special funds. What is your idea of the current status of the special funds? Is the money in there that's supposed to be there?
It's still status quo. It's recorded as a revenue, but on the asset side, it's a receivable, a due from the government of Guam. So that money hasn't been deposited into the bank account.
If you received everything you're supposed to receive, what would the balance be?
Excluding the permanent transfer out that happened in 2017, it should be somewhere in $300-some thousand.
Say that again? I can't.
About $300-some thousand in the bank account.
200,000?
300.
Oh, 300,
Yes.
okay. All right, that's what's due, and then that permanent transfer was how much? You're
Total-
saying that was transferred out of this special fund, and we,
Yes,
yeah.
that occurred in FY 2017. That was a cumulative total of a little over $600-some thousand
All right, yes.
that came from the Loan Guarantee Fund and the Survey and
Survey and
Infrastructure Development Fund.
And no efforts to get that to be refunded?
We have written letters to the governor requesting for such action, and the Department of Administration as well.
Okay, so no response.
Not at this time.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Joey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you ask Ms. Pika to please come on in? Thank you, Sergeant Arms, for swearing in Ms. Pika Farron. Ms. Farron, I think there are some questions that the Oversight Chair on Land would like to ask you, and maybe some of my colleagues would like. I really don't have too many questions, but we'll see. Senator Therese?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate your allowing this questioning. And Ms. Farron, thank you very much. You've been the chairperson of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission for several years, and you've served on the board for even more years, and I want to thank you for that service. It's my understanding that you've announced publicly that your term has ended and that you will not be reappointed, so you're ending your term soon. But I wanted to maybe complete that by some of these questions. First of all, I had asked the director if there's any impact from the CLT settlement on the budget that, you know, it was not included in the budget request that was made prior, of course, to the final settlement. And also, if you could talk about, you know, the use of the Survey Infrastructure and Development Fund for purposes other than surveying. I mean, they're using it for equipment, it looks like, and it was supposed to be used for surveying, mapping, you know, or construction of access roads, water, and power utilities, very specific. I think right before he left, Joey said there's about only $200,000 now in there after the $600,000 was transferred out a couple years ago, contrary to law, I guess. But if you could just, weigh in on those issues.
Sure. Thank you, Senator San Agustin, for allowing me in to answer some of the more detailed questions about the settlement. My name is Pika Farron. I'm chairperson for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. I am actually in the last maybe 10 days of my my holdover as a member of the commission. Okay, so and I have not been reappointed, so someone has been appointed to take my place. But I'm here today to close out my time on the commission the best way that I can. So in terms of the settlement agreement has been approved by the commission. It's been signed, to my knowledge, by I signed it on behalf of the commission. The commission's attorney, Mike Phillips, has signed it. Administrative Director Jack Hattig has signed it. And Mr. James Canto from the AG's office, who represented the government of Guam, has also signed it. From there, I don't know where the agreement has landed, but eventually it will have to be signed and approved by the governor's office. From there, I believe then that's when we turn to you, the legislative body, to look at the settlement and consider the settlement in regards to the terms of the settlement, which for the most part have most to do with the Chamorro Land Trust Act itself. So it requires legislative change to our enabling legislation. The changes that are required per the settlement terms are actually quite administrative. There won't be any impacts to our current leaseholders, whether they're residential, agricultural, or commercial. They are left untouched. The settlement terms deal only with our applicants waiting for leases. And what the change is there is to the settlement terms have put forth new criteria to determine if an applicant is qualified for the Chamorro Land Trust program. And again, it's very administrative. I don't see any real needs for an increased budget to administer the changes that's required by the settlement. However, I have to caveat that with, even if we didn't have this settlement and the administrative changes that are needed, the Chamorro Land Trust is severely understaffed. And it has been something that I've been trying to work with the administration to get our Chamorro Land Trust agency the right budget appropriation so we can have the right number of staff on hand As I think one of you mentioned, there's 11,668 acres in the Chamorro Land Trust inventory. We have, I think our last count was maybe 8 people working to manage that intense amount of inventory. And it's not just managing the land, we also have thousands and thousands of people on our waiting list. We have thousands of leaseholders. We have so many environmental concerns that we want to address. But because of our severe lack of staff, I would say from the get-go, from the time the Chamorro Land Trust agency was stood up and the commission was formed, it has always been severely understaffed. This was documented, I believe it was a 1999 management audit of the Chamorro Land Trust, and even back then they were saying that we are severely understaffed. So although my comment is the settlement will not require us to have an additional budget appropriation, I'm also saying that our regular operations require a bigger budget for more staff. But in terms of the settlement agreement, there is also training that is required as per the settlement agreement, but from my understanding, GURA has offered to allow our staff to attend the training, the same training that they're also required to do. So there won't be any cost on our, there won't be any burden on the Chamorro Land Trust. I wonder if I answered your question about the settlement?
Yes, for me. And what about the use of the, well, thank you for your efforts on that settlement. And the Chamorro Land Trust went through a very turbulent period a couple years ago, last term during our last legislative term that was. And I want to thank you for seeing it through that period. I think there were many who were ready to throw in the towel on the whole thing because of allegations of, improprieties and, of course, we found out, after you studied it, that it was over many years of just different things. And so very many issues to resolve, from board issues to, director versus board issues and things like this. But hopefully we're on the right track. I know that at that time you presented a short-term and a long-term plan that for the commission to move forward. But if I could just ask you in particular about this proposed use in the budget today of survey infrastructure and development funds, because one of the long-term issues with the Chamorro Land Trust is inability to rent these properties because we haven't surveyed them, or they're not registered, or you can't divide them, and that type of issues. So this survey fund was set aside specifically to take care of infrastructure and surveying, and it just doesn't seem adequate for those purposes. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? What are the long-term solution for the surveying if the fund's not sufficient, or the fund's been transferred out, or just being used for other purposes such as laptops and things?
Well, to be honest, I had the same questions. We had a meeting May 21st where this budget was presented to the commission, and the commission had the same questions. Why are we spending infrastructure funding on laptops and everything? I believe that the Survey and Infrastructure Fund, if it's used appropriately, can solve a lot of the issues that our current leaseholders have. As you mentioned, there's no access, there's no infrastructure for power, for them to get power, getting water to the lots, or even sewer services. And it is prohibitively priced if they were to go out and do it themselves. So it has been a goal of the commission, actually one of our priorities, that we presented last February when we got our new director, Mr. Hattig, that he works with the utility agencies to find out how we can go about this in a methodical way to get surveys and infrastructure done so that our leaseholders can actually do something with the land. And, unfortunately, it has not progressed to where I would like it to progress, but as I understand it, the director has met with the utility agencies. But, unfortunately, there has not been, I have not seen anything proposed or discussed at the commission level to use the funds in the way I believe the funds were created and were meant to be used. For land registration, I believe that land registration should not be a cost borne by the Chamorro Land Trust agency. It should be borne by the government of Guam through the Department of Land Management. When the Chamorro Land Trust was created, our inventory included so much unregistered land. And I don't know where else in the United States there's unregistered land, but there's a lot here. And it's time consuming and costly to get those lands registered, and it should not be a burden of the land trust. It should have already been registered and given over to the land trust ready for leasing. Because by law, we cannot lease lands that are unregistered. I believe also this was discussed at our last meeting, and the vice chair, who is a retiree from the Department of Land Management, also cited a couple of laws that basically said that the cost should not be borne by the land trust. It should be borne by Department of Land Management. Director Hattig assured us that he would go back and speak with Mr. Borja from Land Management to ensure that the memorandum of agreement that they're working on includes that. So I don't know where that is today. The 600,000+ that was transferred out of the land trust funds, I believe that was in 2017, that we had to write off on our audit. We have been trying to engage with the administration to get the money back, because we did see that other special funds that had money transferred out of it, they did get their money back. So we're just, kind of hoping that the Chamorro Land Trust will also be afforded that opportunity. Again, I think a lot of the work that the Chamorro Land Trust Agency and the Commission does can be absolutely bolstered and moved forward so we could see real progress if we had a budget that allowed us to have a staff that can function the best way that they can. Right now, like I said, we are so understaffed. They're always playing catch up. There's never a time where the staff can kind of take a step back and strategize and put things together, put comprehensive plans together that can be presented to the commission like we've asked. They are just struggling to keep their heads above water. And then, when this pandemic hit, the agency was shut down. So, I guess that's kind of where I see it. I know that the budget can really answer a lot of the problems, but budget after budget, it's almost like it's handed to us, and the commission has no say on it. I also want to point out, I'm not sure, but you mentioned that there's some appropriation from the general fund in this 2021 budget, and that is the first appropriation from the general fund to the Chamorro Land Trust Agency. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'm hoping that since that appropriation is there, that we can maybe look further and say, okay, now that the Land Trust is allowed to have money from the general fund, can we get more so we can actually do our jobs right?
Yeah, it looks like $41,000 from the general fund for this year. Mm-hmm. It looks like the Chamorro Land Trust going forward it's only asking for the same amount of staff, a little bit, maybe $50,000 more in personnel costs, but same amount of FTEs from what I'm reading, Mr. Chair. And yeah, it looks like the increase, there's increases in, a little bit in contractual, and then they transferred the equipment and then capital outlay costs over to the SID, the survey fund. So going forward, I appreciate your recommendations. What would you say? It's unfortunate, I think, on the long-term and the short-term goals that you had set in place, I mean, what do you think would give the biggest bang for the buck at this point from the legislature moving forward? Is it increasing personnel or something else for this, ensuring the survey funds are used for that purpose, or something else? What would you recommend? And I want to thank you again for your service to this commission.
Well, thank you. I believe that, when we were taken out of land management, what that did also was it took our supervisors who were employees of land management. So we lost our supervisors. Those are the high-level positions, and these individuals had institutional knowledge about the land trust, land management. They were so integral to our operations, and so for the last just about a year, we've been operating without them. However, just recently, maybe over the last 6 months, we were able to work with land management to get one of them back working on land trust. I don't know, I don't think he's part-time. I don't think he's full-time. I think he's part-time. But I would say bang for the buck would be to give the land trust more budget so that we can have these higher level positions on the team, managing the team full-time. So we have the director, and if you look at the labor or the positions, these are not supervisory positions. These are, these are staff that do great work, but they're more in the weeds. We need somebody, I think we've worked with the director and we put together a proposed organizational chart. Was that included in your budget packet?
Yes.
Was it? So you could see in our land.
It's in the budget digest, Speaker.
Okay, in the budget digest. So if you could look at the organizational chart, you'll see there's a land administrator that's proposed and a land agent 3 that's proposed. I think there might be a few other positions that are proposed, but I mean, really, in order to have the trust work the way it should be, we need to have a robust staff. I think that would help. I think getting the money back from Department of Administration from that transfer out would also allow us to say, okay, we have this much money, this is how we're going to spend it. But again, the commission can't, we can give as much as we can give in our commission meetings, as much direction as we can, as detailed as we can, but we're not working in the office. We won't know the intricacies of how things work. The team at the Land Trust Agency they're a really good team. A lot of them have been there for, so many years, maybe even decades. And I think if we were able to just tap into the talent that's already there by putting in more supervisory, higher level positions of qualified individuals, they would really be a much stronger team to respond to the vision and directives given by the commission. And then if we get the money back from Department of Administration, like I said, and we have the staff in place to actually put together a plan that is workable, then we'd be sitting pretty nicely.
All right. Well, I've reviewed some of your detailed proposals, and I thought that it seemed obvious that you had to put in a lot of time and effort to really get into that much detail and to know the processes in and out. And it does seem, and I'm going to tell you earlier, Ancestral Lands Commission was here, and they seem to also be, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud right now, but it seems to me that while we may all have thought there would be great benefit in separating the three agencies from the Department of Land Management, but it was so abrupt that it seems, I know that it caused quite, it increased the costs a little bit because each one of them had to carry now rent. We lost staff that used to work together, now no working together. And I'm glad to hear that at least at the Chamorro Land Trust is operational. It's got its plans in place to move forward. I hope that they can, adhere to those, because Ancestral Lands Commission was in here and it just looks like it's looking alarming today that they're losing employees. They don't have enough employees to begin with. Very similar story, and unfortunately. But I'm very concerned about the people on these leases at the Chamorro Land Trust, that the whole purpose of it was to get, residential set up. And so we want to do what we need to do to make this commission move forward in that regard, in residential leases especially, agricultural leases especially, and the perennial problems that have gone on for decades to move on those two. And I've seen the solutions that have been drawn out, so I'm just hoping that we can move on those. And so I will look again at the staffing and see what we can do. But thank you very much. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Therese. One simple question. The commission, is that an operation commission or is it a policy commission?
I'm sorry, operational or policy?
You're both?
I'm not sure. What do you mean?
In other words, does the commission have the authority to direct the Chamorro Land Trust folks in everything they do?
We have the authority to direct the administrative director. And then he takes our direction and then, organizes his staff appropriately.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Madam Vice, do you have any questions on Ms. Pica?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions. Thank you for the detailed explanation of the settlement for the people so that they understand. I think not many of us are aware of the SID fund and how it should be appropriately used. There is the oversight chair brought a concern that we're using this for laptops and computers when we should be using it for something more concrete and long-lasting like surveying and so forth. And I'd also like to thank you, PICA Commission Chair, on the amount of work that you have done for the people of Guam, especially during the difficult times that we had last term. You stuck with it. You didn't give up, and you really worked hard to help the people and the leaseholders and to help the commission move forward in the adverse times that we faced. I hope you weren't resigning, or I hope your term wasn't up, and I hope that we could reappoint you and move forward, because you have done an excellent job for the people, really helping them. And I think with your vision that we can move Chamorro Land Trust forward much more than we've done in the previous years. And I also like to thank you and your husband for the work that you've done to give back to the community during COVID. Thank you for the amount of food donations and contributions you've given to our community. So hope to see you again soon in some kind of capacity in this area of service. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Tello, do you have anything you want to ask of Ms. Pica?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Pica, it's always a pleasure to see you. And sound advice, you've always been one to just, like me, blunt, to the point. This is what we need. So I greatly appreciate all the service that you provide to our island in serving on this board. And I would request, if I may, that all your recommendations, if you're not going to be reappointed, I mean, I know it's trying. What you went through would make anybody just give up and walk away. But if you have any recommendations or anything moving forward for Chamorro Land Trust, because, it's dear to most of our, colleagues' heart, and making sure that it's successful and do what it's intended to do, to help those individuals who need a home, a foundation to start their families. And I know that was deep in your heart and rooted inside to be able to do that. It's one of the greatest feelings, to have a family, have a home. And if you have those recommendations, if you could please email it to me as we move forward. You said you only had 10 days left? 10 days?
Yes.
Wow. So of course, this budget is not going to be heard in the next 10 days, but, so if you could please, send those recommendations. And I do have the organizational chart that you said I'm looking at. And what I'm seeing here is land administrator as one. The other one was land agent 3. And the other one was private secretary. Those were the 3 that were proposed on the organizational chart. I didn't see anyone else in that, but I'm pretty sure it should include additional land agents and those that you lost at land management. The second thing would be your recommendation whether Chamorro Land Trust should go back to the Department of Land Management. And, I've mentioned that before, that I think it's important. I don't know why it was separated from them, and I'm not going to get into that. But so is there anywhere else in this organizational chart, do you see that I did mention? Because I only have those 2 areas except the private secretary. Well, for the sake of time,
Yeah.
Pika, I know you're getting your thoughts together.
Yeah. I think this was like the bare minimum of what the commission wanted to see. But I think as proposed, I believe it would be very effective in improving our operations, making us more efficient and more effective. When Land Trust was pulled out of DLM, I did agree. I believe it should be separated from DLM. Before that, we were operating, our administrative director was also the director of Ancestral Lands and also the director of land management. So it was one position holding 3 hats. So I was very happy that we were pulled out and we were given a full-time administrative director. I think that was probably one of the best things because it clearly separates the mission of the Chamorro Land Trust from land management. However, there are really integral functions that the Chamorro Land Trust overlaps with land management. One was the surveying. I believe those are engineering technicians. And then also basically just like administration of the land, right? Recording of leases and all of that side that we have to go through land management for. So there's definitely some overlap. And I believe the director has been working with Mr. Borja from the Department of Land Management to flesh out all of those overlaps and create a memorandum of agreement that basically allows us to keep the benefits that the Land Trust was receiving when we were lumped together, while also recognizing that we are 2 distinct entities. So I'm hoping that the memorandum of agreement would address those issues.
I think we can do a win-win situation here. Still you have the power to make the decisions without having to go to land management to make those decisions. That was, I thought, the only thing that was holding it back with Chamorro when it was merged together. And I think that that could be an easy solve, in that perspective, if it was all brought back together. Before you came in and was speaking to the oversight chair of Chamorro Land Trust, I wasn't sure if I heard the amount of how much it's going to cost for this settlement. I was actually out of the room. Were you able to answer the question on the settlement agreement?
The settlement agreement did not include any monetary payments from the Chamorro Land Trust at all. There's no money that the Land Trust has to pay to Department of Justice.
The Dave Davis case, correct?
It was the Department of Justice versus Chamorro Land Trust.
Okay.
Yeah, so no, there's no monetary payments.
Okay.
We worked very hard in negotiations to ensure that. The settlement terms were really geared towards changing some wording within the Chamorro Land Trust Act,
Right.
and really better defining what beneficiary qualifications are. Whereas prior, it was based on whether you or you're a descendant of somebody who became an American citizen by virtue of the Organic Act. That was our criteria before for qualifying for the program. Now there's more specific criteria that speaks to the real purpose of the Land Trust Act, which is to return land to individuals and their descendants who had land taken from them. And so the criteria now is involves a lot more detail about that. And, you know, the settlement terms lay it out pretty plainly what the criteria will be. And my read of it, along with my commissioners and our attorney, Mike Phillips, this new criteria actually opens up the program to more individuals that previously had not been considered qualified for the program, but who did in fact have land taken from them by the U.S. Navy or U.S. federal government. So we believe that the new criteria from the settlement term is actually a more fair way of ensuring that land gets returned to those individuals or their descendants.
I see. Well, you did a lot of work on that. I greatly appreciate that. I've heard the hours you put in that, even on weekends, and on top of having to your family as well. And I'm pretty sure they're kind of happy that, you know, you'll be home more and give them more attention. But you know, if the governor doesn't reappoint you, it's a great loss for everyone, you know, to have you off the board. But I want to thank you again for all your services, and I'm crossing my fingers that you'll stay and be able to continue to serve the people of Guam, because you do such a great job at doing that. Keeping the best interest of the people of Guam, that's what I see every time you come forward with your ideas. Thank you again.
Well, thank you, Senator. You know, it's hard for me to step away from the Chamorro Land Trust. It's been really my passion project for the last 4 years. But I'm hoping that, you know, maybe my time away would actually give me some time and space to really reflect on everything that's been happening and not be like so deep in the weeds that, you know, perhaps maybe in the near future I might be reappointed, and perhaps I'll be more effective at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Thank you for that statement, Ms. Speaker. I like that one. Senator Sabina, do you have anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no questions, but I just want to thank you so much, Pika, for all that you've done on the commission. And I do appreciate your perspective and how to strengthen the Chamorro Land Trust and adding those positions. The other thing, in regards to these positions, is there any capacity for them to actually oversee the leases, to see that they're being carried out appropriately? Is that covered in this organizational chart?
You know, I think compliance is definitely one side of our operations that is a lot more reactive than proactive, because there are so many other competing interests. You know, this org chart is a start. I think what this will help us to do is administer leases quicker, award leases quicker, and be more deliberate when we do award the leases, so that the individuals have a piece of property that they're ready to use and occupy. But I don't think that this organizational chart as presented in the Budget Digest is our ideal. This is our first step. I believe a compliance department, in order to really do the job right, there should be a small compliance department to go out and look at our properties. And, you know, I say compliance, but really more I see our compliance arm being more there to assist our leaseholders. You know, we don't want to award somebody a lease and then they go out and because they don't have enough money, they have to build a lean-to for themselves because they can't afford to pour concrete and what have you. That is actually the current situation of so many of our leaseholders. They have the land, but not enough money to build a concrete structure for them and their families, but they do with what they have, and they can build a home for themselves and their families. But according to the law, if it's not a permitted building structure, the land trust can evict them. And that is not the point of the land trust, to punish those that are unable to build a home for themselves. So I see our compliance arm working more with them, maybe connecting them to developers that have affordable homes, connecting them to lending agencies, and then also for the agricultural side, the compliance side will identify leaseholders that are not using their properties to the best that they can and connecting them to get the help that they need so that they can farm the land appropriately. But for compliance, I don't, right now we're reactive, and this org chart does not bolster us enough to kind of get to that next level.
Yeah, just an FYI, there's a affordability rate study that PUC is undergoing with GWA. So if I think there's any opportunity for the CLTC to get involved in those discussions, I think it'll be a good time. So just a recommendation.
Yeah.
But again, thank you so much, Pika, and appreciate all the work that you've done.
Okay.
And best wishes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Sabina. Thank you, Pika, for your service. And I like that. You can be more aggressive next time, but just be aggressive even if you're not part of it. Please feel free to submit your recommendation to the Oversight Chair, to myself, and all our colleagues, because we like to know exactly the views of everybody and anybody. Because that's the beauty of an open, all our offices are open. You know, being you'll be soon to be formally from the Chamorro Land Trust. You know exactly what it takes to get it going. I like to see it going. I was on the list, and I did sign up in 1995 when they first opened, and I still don't have anything, but that's okay. I can understand. I hope they'll come to my name soon. But that being said, thank you. The committee will conclude the budget hearing for the Chamorro Land Trust, but we will suspend on Department of Land Management and Ancestral Lands. Please address any written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, Housing, and submit it via email to Senator joe.s.augustin@gmail.com. This is Jules Mossy for your attendance and participating in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. The budget hearing on Bill 282-35 relative to Chamorro Land Trust Commission is now adjourned, and Department of Land Management and Ancestral Land Commission has been suspended. It is now 11:31. Thank you. Have a nice day.